Hell Let Loose has had a pretty successful launch, I would say. It originally released on PC back into early access in June 2019, full release in July 2021, and it later released on consoles in October 2021, but without the Eastern Front, and we'll get onto that a little bit later. But I believe Hell Let Loose has huge franchise potential. I mean, the audience for the game is just steadily growing and growing. We can look at that at the Steam charts. It is on an upward trend. Can't see what it's like on the consoles. But I also believe that Team 17, the publishers of the game, believe this as well because they bought Hell Let Loose for £31 million plus £15 million performance bonus back to the devs Black Matter based on certain criteria, which we don't know what that is. And based on that purchase, we know that they're not really going to make all that money back based on just future Hell Let Loose 1 sales or DLC. That's a lot of money to make up, really. So there's going to be another game in the franchise, and we'll call it the franchise. There's got to be for that amount of money. And based on the current game, I believe there is a lot of potential of where Hell Let Loose could take its formula to, and that it could be a really successful franchise. Maybe not on the scale as Call of Duty or Battlefield, but quite up there in player numbers. Before I get into Hell Let Loose and what I believe it does really well, let's look at what led up to the launch of Hell Let Loose and some other things that happened in the gaming industry that led a lot of people to actually look and play Hell Let Loose. So we're going to go back to November 2018. November 2018 was the launch for Battlefield 5. The next big mainline Battlefield franchise going back to its roots in World War II. Now I think a lot of people, including myself, was hoping for more of a grounded World War II game. You know, something similar to, well, Battlefield 1942. But we got something quite different. And it all started with this reveal trailer. It showed a lot of things that people didn't want to see. You know, you could see the samurai sword on a guy's back when they're clearly quite fighting in the Western Front. A lot of people weren't happy that there was women in the game. Yes, they didn't fight on the front lines. There were some frontline fighters in the Eastern Front, but generally there weren't, so people got pissed off with that. There was the steampunk type amputees, which just didn't really happen. You know, if you were amputated in World War II, you were sent back home, and that was that. I'm glad they got rid of the amputee customization. It didn't really fit World War II, but actually playing the game and having women in the game, it doesn't actually really bother me at all. It's not really a big deal. But with Battlefield 5, it was a bit of a change for the normal Battlefield formula. You know, they moved away from the traditional bloom gunplay to recoil, which was a really good change. But it still wasn't what fans wanted from World War II. There's a real big lack of like the epic, well-known World War II battles in Battlefield 5. Where's Omaha Beach, for example? Where's Carentan? Where's the entire Eastern Front? There's a lot of stuff missing that people wanted. And as I said before, people wanted something that was a bit more grounded, not flashy and stylized. So with its original launch, a lot of people weren't too impressed with Battlefield 5. It is gaining more players now because of a different Battlefield game, which I'll touch on. But back then, it wasn't really the World War II experience that a lot of people had hoped it would have been. And then in June 2019, Hell Let Loose releases onto Steam and Early Access. It is the grounded World War II shooter experience that we wanted. And of course, for an Early Access release, it was buggy, it was, well, early. Wasn't a lot of content because it was its original release. There's still a lot more maps, weapons, vehicles, and everything else to come out for it. There was performance issues, which for some players still happen to this day. On PC, when the Eastern Front got released, Stalingrad wasn't called Stalingrad in the community, it was called Stuttergrad. But it was a strong release for Early Access, and then the devs got to work, putting in new content, bug fixes, performance fixes, and just changing and improving the game. And now let's fast forward a little bit to November 2021. The next big Battlefield game, Battlefield 2042, and well, we don't really need to go into all the issues that game's had. It's terrible. The devs are finishing it since it's, well, I'm going to call it early alpha access release. I'm done with Battlefield 2042. I've tried it. It's not for me. I tried the latest patch. I just got matchmaking issues and then uninstalled it. Just done with that. But because that Battlefield game was so disappointing, and a lot of people were disappointed from Battlefield 5 still, people started to look elsewhere, right, for other games and other shooters they could play. And in July 2021, that's when Hell Let Loose fully released on PC, coming out of early access with the Eastern Front content. And in October the same year, it released onto next gen, or current gen, I guess you could say now, consoles. And it was free for a month for PlayStation Plus users, which helped to get a lot more eyes onto it and build up that player base, because it is crossplay between Xbox and PS5. And I have seen a lot of comments in my videos and generally on Reddit of people that have come from Battlefield 5 or 2042 to Hell Let Loose because of how bad those games were, or disappointing those games were. They looked elsewhere and they found Hell Let Loose, and it's the game they want. And for me, and I think many others, this is what Battlefield 5 should have been. This more grounded World War II shooter experience, a big focus on team play, gritty action, and it's just, honestly, it's just awesome to play. But what makes Hell Let Loose so great? Now, a lot of realistic or tactical shooters tend to have like a really slow movement system. They're aiming, they have like a bit of a dead zone when you aim, so you're aiming your gun, and if you move left or right, your guy will just sort of move around, move his arm first, instead of doing the traditional shooter thing and turning on a swivel, right? So that's what Hell Let Loose uses, and that makes it immediately familiar to any refugees that have come from, say, Call of Duty or Battlefield, because all you need to do is get your sensitivity right in game, and then you're pretty much good to go. And the movement, while it is slower than traditional shooters, it's still immediately familiar. You have no stamina system you have to worry about. You can just jump in and start running and gunning if you wanted to. There are other sim-like shooters like Postscriptum or Squad that do have a stamina system, and when you're having to move across a large distance, having to stop to get your stamina back so you can run faster so it doesn't affect your aiming, it can get a bit tiresome. I understand why the stamina system's in there, because it's meant to be more of a sim-like experience. You can't just run full pelt carrying all that gear and not be tired out from it, so I do understand why it's there. But because you don't have to worry about that in Hell Let Loose, it just lets you get back into the action so much quicker. You don't have to worry about your stamina being low and it affecting your ADS, you know? It's just so much better just to get back into the combat. And the tank play, I can't really comment too much on the tank play. I've played Hell Let Loose for over 1,000 hours, and I've played, what, maybe 2 or 3 full matches in a tank. Tanks just aren't really my thing. Just give me a rifle or a submachine gun, something like that. I love the Thompson in the game at the moment, absolutely love it. But from what I hear from tank players is that it does have good tank combat. They do say Postscriptum has a much better tank system. They recently reworked their tank system and it's been received really well. The general combat in Hell Let Loose is brutal, gory, but it's really satisfying. You know, you get that headshot, you hear the ding noise. It sounds so good. Getting a bunch of kills, capturing and defending the objectives. It is just really satisfying to play. And the ballistic system that Hell Let Loose uses, again, it is quite simple. It has bullet travel and bullet drop, but I'd say it's pretty easy to pick up because the bullets do travel pretty fast, so you don't have to aim miles ahead of someone when you're shooting them at range. It's pretty easy to adjust to. And what Hell Let Loose brings is large maps, and all the maps in Hell Let Loose are the same size, and they're quite varied. You have more urban maps like Carentan or Stalingrad. You got your more open field maps like Purple Heart Lane, Foy, Kursk. You have maps which are a bit of a mix, like you could maybe say Carentan is a bit of a mix of more open and urban, but there's Sainte-Marie-Église. San Marie Dumont. You have big forests like Hurtgun Forest and Hill 400. There's a big variation there, and what Hell Let Loose does as well, just to bring that extra variation into the game, is that it randomizes the control points which are active at one point. So in this map you see here, there's a whole bunch of control points, but there will only be 5 control points that will actually be active in the game you're playing. And only 2 control points will be active at once, apart from the very beginning of the game where you have the neutral point. And the 2 control points that are active is your most forward control point and the enemy's most forward control point. And that keeps combat focused around those 2 points, really. And that just helps to keep you in the action pretty much all the time. You can be. And these maps have been recreated using satellite and aerial photography, even using World War II photography for them. Although they do adjust some maps for gameplay reasons, but also throughout the development process for Hell Let Loose, and we're talking from when it went into early access to today, they do actually go back to the older maps, adjust them, or when they've improved certain assets like foliage, they'll go back and put those new assets into the old maps, therefore increasing the visual quality of the maps, increasing the performance of the maps, and just making them better. There's not a lot of games that actually do that. So the devs, Black Matter, it's really good that they do that. Now, for future content for Hell Let Loose, console players, you're going to be getting the Eastern Front sometime soon, hopefully. And moving on from that, the 2 major pieces of content that will be coming will be the currently labeled the British expansion, but it looks like that may be changing from just the British to the Commonwealth. So it may be a Commonwealth force we get, which will be a mixture of British, Australian and Canadian cosmetics, because the weaponry that those guys used were pretty similar. And then forward from that, there'll be the Pacific. That's based on their Kickstarter campaign and based on interviews that Max, the CEO of Black Matter, has had. That looks like that's what's happening. But in between those major expansions, you'll be getting new weapons and new maps, new vehicles, and other improvements to the game. And then we need to look to the further future with what I believe will be Hell Let Loose 2, because no one's going to spend up to, 40 odd million for DLC purchases, which really, they don't have a lot of purchasable DLC for the game, and it's not going to make 40 million. So I've been speaking to my community and the Hell Let Loose community to see what they want from Hell Let Loose 2, and generally it seems to be moving towards Vietnam, which I think would be great because we haven't had like a mainline Vietnam shooter in a very long time. I think the last one I can think of the top of my head is Rising Storm 2 Vietnam, or the Bad Company 2 expansion. We are getting Burning Lands, which is another realistic shooter coming out. I think the Kickstarter for that is happening this year in 2022, but we have no idea how that game is going to play yet. But with Hell Let Loose 2, we would have to assume that how the game plays now would be moved across to Vietnam. But also the community seems to want Hell Let Loose as a franchise to stay in World War II, which I can't think of any good reason why it should do that. Yes, if Hell Let Loose 1 ended with the Pacific theatre, it's going to be missing the Mediterranean, North Africa as major theatres of war. It's going to be missing those. And there's loads of other battles and factions you could put into the game. But if Hell Let Loose 2 released as another World War II game, it's going to probably feel like it's retreading a lot of old ground, and it could raise the question as to why it just wasn't DLC for Hell Let Loose 1. I would hope that Hell Let Loose 2 would be made on Unreal Engine 5, and if they did stay in World War II and went to Unreal Engine 5, if they brought across all the old content from Hell Let Loose 1, then yeah, that would be good, and I personally would be happy with that. But I do think Vietnam would be a good place to go to, because yes, there's a lack of Vietnam new shooters out, and the combat system will say the infantry combat from Hell Let Loose 1 I think would perfectly translate across to Vietnam, because it's still this kind of mixture of modern versus World War II weaponry in Vietnam. You still got things like the Mosin, Thompson, grease gun, while moving forward a little bit with like AKs and the M16s, but that still brings like this mixture of bolt action, semi-auto, and fully auto rifles, which is in Hell Let Loose 1. So bringing it to Vietnam, it would just be an easy translation, to be honest. And being Vietnam would bring in so many new things into, we'll say, the franchise. There need to be new mechanics, new types of fortifications that can be built. You need to bring in napalm, so really have to build up a fire mechanic. I know flamethrowers are coming to Hell Let Loose 1, but they would really have to expand on that, I would think, for, say, like napalm. But whatever the devs decide, I mean, the future devs for Hell Let Loose 2 are not going to be Black Matter. They've got an 18-month contract, which is now more like a year remaining on that for Hell Let Loose. And once that's done, they're going to do their own thing. I think they're going to be doing a fantasy game, but we have no idea who's actually going to develop Hell Let Loose 2. And whether Team 17 are the right people to develop it or not, I've made a video which you can check out, not there, up there, talking about Team 17 and their recent issues. I'm not really sure if these are the guys I'd want to make it. They're probably going to either set up a new studio for it, buy a studio to make it, or get the console devs, which is Flix Interactive, to make Hell Let Loose 2. Yeah, we just got to wait for an announcement, to be honest. But I am looking forward to Hell Let Loose 2, definitely. I think the game has long legs. It's got a long shelf life. It has a growing audience. There are people out there that want to play these more accessible, realistic shooters. That's what I'd call Hell Let Loose. An accessible, realistic shooter. An arse. Yeah, it's an arse. But we've got to see what the IP holders Team 17 have in store for the franchise. It should be a franchise. I think it deserves to be because of how good it is. But again, at the same time, it's a bit worrying that the creators of the game won't be involved with Hell Let Loose 2. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Where do you think Hell Let Loose should go? Are you a fan? Are you not? If you like this video, please give it a like. Subscribe for more. Thank you for watching.